Hi. So I just wanted to talk about some of the events that went down today. I just got home. We left around 9:40 or something. Um, got there around 2 p.m. And I would love to give a comprehensive rundown of these events because my phone died in the middle. I will be getting a compilation of footage out again. I'm gonna have to borrow it from my partner's phone, so it might take a little bit. But I want to try to get that figured out tomorrow. In the meantime, this is how this went down. Uh, Sorry for my everything. I just took a shower. So, got to get all of that pepper ball spray off of you. Um, so we show up, and there are not a lot of people there to start with. And by the time we get there, there are already piles of Lime bikes at every single exit to this building. Not the front and back exits, just the carports. And so those were totally blocked off by Lime scooters and bikes that people had brought over. And that was to make sure that no ICE cars or agents could leave those carports with their detainees. And I think it's a fantastic, fantastic thing to do. So, you know, people are building these barricades and um, trying to be as effective as possible doing so. And I would love to interject very quickly and just say and give a shout out to anybody who brought food or water or medical gear to this event. It was all very needed. There were so many people that needed, if not all three of those things, at least one of them. So that's the kind of thing that I like to see when I'm at a protest. That amount of solidarity and community is absolutely so integral and important to a very successful protest. And despite what occurred today, I would call this a successful protest. I don't think that because people were arrested, it was an unsuccessful event. I don't think that because a lot of people went home before things popped off, it was an unsuccessful event. I think that every single person that was there contributed to something that matters a lot more than what just happened today. I think that this whole thing matters a lot. So that's my quick interjection. Just thank you to those people who brought help and assistance when needed and were quick with their reaction times. Incredibly important, so I salute that. Moving on to what happened today. Barricaded carports. Um, Katie Davisport was one of the first bad actors that I noticed, just kind of hanging out around the protesters. She was across the street, kind of rubbing elbows with somebody that was already, before I got there, confirmed to be a federal agent. And they were watching and laughing and just having a grand old time together. Other than that, and Katie, she's out there as a distraction, and she knows she is. She's out there specifically in moments of crisis to draw eyes to her instead of where she knows the cops are. She's in their pocket, and she knows exactly when and where they're going to mobilize. So I've learned to watch Katie Davisport anytime that she is moving into a different direction. She's being told to do that. So that's where we should be putting our eyes as well. If Katie Davisport is mobilizing, you should follow her because there is something afoot, and she knows about it. And whether that's getting out of the area safely before things get kind of crazy, or it's getting to an area where things are about to get kind of crazy so she can film it. Either way, you're doing something that's probably on the up and up by following this woman. But ignoring Katie Davisport for now, because she has already had so much of the fucking limelight on her today, I would like to talk about first the guy who pulled a gun on us at a crosswalk. And then I would like to talk about the person that I recognized while we were there who threatened people with gun violence and with an active taser. So, to start, we saw that guy first. We saw the taser guy first. I had seen him at a previous protest. He tried to mess with me physically, and you know, it went about as well as that was going to go. And he recognized me at this protest as well, despite having altered my appearance literally at all. I kind of didn't expect that because this guy seems really stupid. But other than that, right, besides that, he's walking past, and I point him out to the protesters because the last protest he was undercover and trying to instigate and film people from within our crowd. So I made it known immediately that he was that person, and he was threatened by that. He was wearing a hoodie that had Nazi iconography on it, so he was not trying to blend in quite as well. It was mostly dog whistle iconography. I'm talking symbols and numbers. Um, so, I mean, he maybe thought he was going to blend in, but there's no chance. Anyway, I recognize his face. He's walking past. I call him out on it very, very publicly. He turns around, says he recognizes me, pulls out a taser, threatens us with tasers. And then we followed him to the other side of the protest because they had a split on one federal building, like on one side of the federal building, and then on the other. And then later split on all sides because they were using every single corner of that building to instigate violence. And I mean, it was a militarized practice. These people that were inside of the courthouse, or sorry, the people that were inside, um, whether they were ICE or police or security or Homeland Security, or SWAT, or whoever the fuck were in there. They had a militarized plan to divide and conquer and do it as efficiently as they possibly could. And with so little protesters out at this protest, not to say or detract from their general turnout or the amount of effort that was put into this. I would never want to detract from that. But simply stated, there weren't very many people there. It was less about how many of us there were and how many of them there were. It wasn't quite a numbers game. It was more about how prepared they were for all angles. They, once the carports were shuttered, there were rumors flying around since we were all separated on different sides. People were still bringing their detainees, their hostages, out of the building. And so those rumors were swirling around that they were using some kind of a side exit and then hauling them into trucks. I can't verify that at all. But what I can say is that in that rumor that was swirling around, it was specified to us that in their hurry to leave out of those side exits, they actually ran over and hit with a car 2 other protesters on their way out. So whether or not that rumor can be validated based off of physical violence, I genuinely was on the opposite side of the building, and I cannot personally say, but I did hear a lot about it. So I'm interested to see what comes out of that in the future. I would love to see the news about this event because we weren't disorganized as a group at all, but we weren't communicative enough with each other, period. And that's not a fault on the group. It's very hard to combat specific military engagement when you have no military experience. We're not a militia. It was a group of peaceful protesters. And sure, people blocked exits to things, but nobody did any physical harm or even came close to threatening physical harm to another human being unless they were a cop. There was nothing like that. And to use such excessive force was completely out of line, just entirely. So we were walking, not to get too sidetracked here, we walked over to the other side once we saw Taser Guy, and we're warning people about him, and a couple people in Block came up and said, hey, that guy just threatened me with a gun. And that was the first time that I heard about a gun being at that protest. And this is an unrelated thing from the next incidents I'm going to be talking about. This is not the only instance of, gun violence being threatened at an event. None of the people threatening such things, of course, were protesters, but none of them were cops either. So there were people there who were not just working for the press and threatening gun violence, but also working as undercover agents, or honestly probably just having some kind of an episode at a certain point. It's very hard to tell the motivations of people who threaten unarmed civilians with firearms, and there's really no point in trying to do so. You have to get out of there, or the threat of being shot by somebody who is not who you're protesting against, but is somebody that is in the crowd, becomes much more dangerous of a situation because you cannot tell who to trust. You don't know who you're talking to, and that's something that kills a movement. It kills solidarity, are those bad actors within that crowd. And this guy was one of them, and I'm glad that we called him the fuck out because I did not see him one more time. Just gone. So, either he went inside the building to hang out with his buddies, or he went home. And either way, he was out of our hair. So that was, I would consider a small win. Fuck that dude. Alternately, about 20 minutes later, I'm standing at a crosswalk, and I'm standing next to another person and my partner. And a kid walks by. I believe he had his earphones on or something. He was on his phone, and he wasn't paying a lot of attention, but he had the right of way at the crosswalk, which shouldn't be a factor in what I'm about to talk about, but, he's crossing the crosswalk. There's a giant, dark navy blue truck waiting at the crosswalk at the light to go forward. He rolls down his window, and the guy yells at this kid who's walking past, hey, get off your phone. I don't think the kid even really responded. He just kept walking, and the person next to me said, hey, fuck you, something about, we need to record this for whatever. And it's the kid that's walking past, it's not a protester. He said, get off your phone to some just random kid trying to cross the crosswalk. So this guy is already antagonistic and aggressive and confused because he doesn't even know who the fuck he's talking to. And so they say, hey, fuck you, back to this guy in the car. And he immediately pulls a gun and points it at us out of his car window and then drove away once the light went. And so we got his plates and immediately went over to somebody in the Lawyers Guild and gave them the plate number. Yep. So that was that. And that's how that ended. So we kind of hung out for a little bit and de-stressed a little bit and, ate some of the food that was very lovingly provided to the crowd, talked with some people. Just kind of hung out for a little bit and waited. And I would say that the vast majority of the tactics used by ICE and Homeland and security teams today, whoever we were actually, some of them were SPD, some of them weren't. They were all hanging out together though. A lot of the tactics that they used involved us sweating it out, literally outside in the heat, sweating it out. So they waited as long as they possibly could. The federal building closed at 4, and the real push of stuff started around 8, 7:30 or 8. And so they waited. They waited a long fucking time to try to leave. And well, they opened up one of the garage doors, and we all crowded around and yelled at them, and they opened fire with pepper bullets. They're these little tiny red bullets. They're projectiles that are shot out of what looks to be a gun. It looks like an airsoft or a paintball gun because it's got a little cartridge on the back that holds these little pepper balls. And what they do with that is they shoot you with them, and they explode upon impact into this white powder that is pretty much the same thing as getting maced. Now, they could have, and if they were doing, they could have just sent out a tear gas canister at any point in time, and that would have absolutely dispersed the vast majority of the crowd. I've been tear gassed before, like 2020, tear gassed heavily, and maced, and all sorts of airborne bullshit. The switch that was made, I hadn't even noticed until today, from airborne canister tear gas to projectiles that essentially mace you from a distance. That's not because it's practical. That's not what would have been practical. Would have been for them to send out a tear gas canister. That's practical. What they did was show of force, open fire, and this was the first instance of them doing that, as far as I know. I don't think there was anything before I showed up, like violent against the protesters, what there was here. And I do have videos of all of these events, varying quality of videos because my phone died like halfway through the event, a little over halfway through. And so towards the end, I was using somebody else's phone to film. So I'm gonna get that footage out. But yeah, so they opened fire on us. We have an umbrella brigade at the front, making sure that people aren't getting totally like blasted with it. I had a helmet on, and I'm kind of leaning over the side to film. I'm not even down there with the bikes. I'm just leaning over the side and filming and yelling and angry. And they hit me with one of their pepper bullets, like in the side of the helmet. So I was totally fine. That being said, wear a fucking helmet when you're out there because they're taking headshots and they're aiming on purpose. And the aim, I mean, they took their fucking time to aim those guns at specific people. There was a kid next to me who had all day been doing the most and doing his best. And I think that dude really, really led the charge on a lot of stuff today. And as a result, he got targeted in the first wave of them opening the garage doors, and he got like a full blast to the face. Like we're over there rinsing his eyes out and shit. So the door closes, and we all cheer and yada yada, and then it's back to waiting for like a while. Pizza comes, we all eat pizza. Like it was really nice, and then we get word of all sorts of rumors, things happening on the other side of the building, people getting put into cars, people getting hit by cars, all sorts of rumors flying around, that the cops are coming, that ICE is leaving, all sorts of stuff. And, I think that it was really integral that we had a better communication system for something that was so separated. And once again, that falls on nobody's head. That's nobody's fault. It's a preparation issue. If you're coming to a protest at this point in Seattle in a group that's larger than like 3 people, you need walkie-talkies. And we all need to be on like high alert. If you hear a walkie-talkie disseminating information, go towards that source and listen to it so that you can further disseminate that information to the crowd that didn't hear it. Because Block will frequently have communications, like telecommunications. If you can get any information out of that to the general public that is at that protest, you could potentially be saving lives with that information. So it's incredibly important to communicate, and to communicate accurately and efficiently. And the best way to do that is code words, hand gestures, walkie-talkies, and just keep your head on a fucking swivel, because that's how they get you, is when you're not looking, when you're not prepared, when your back is to a cop. That's what happens. So with all that being said, there's a lot of miscommunication going on. There's a lot of confusion, and people started realizing that they were going to open the gates and they were going to blast alarms and distract people from what was actually happening, which were the front and back entrances of that building, being full of police activity, moving people, potentially moving people in and out of the building. And so people started barricading the front and back doors, and that's when things got really fucked up. So, I mean, there were people making sure with any means necessary that those doors were not openable. And when those doors were opened and the cop pushed the door open and pushed the protesters back and started moving things out of the way of the door and clearing those spaces out, they were also shooting young women at point blank range with a face full of mace. They were popping off rubber bullets at people indiscriminately, just completely into the crowd, shooting at their feet, shooting at their head. And then you've also got the other entrance having the same issue back to back to back. So you can either be on this side and deal with this intermittently, or be on that side and deal with it intermittently, or circle the building over and over and over and over and over and over and over again so you don't miss any fucking action. And, that's what a lot of people, including myself, ended up doing. The vast majority of the time was back and forth, up and down that fucking street, over and over again, just trying to figure out what the hell's going on. So we get up to I think it's the back. No, it's the front. We get up to the front of the building, and that's when the 2 arrests were made. I'll be putting that footage up for sure. They arrested a guy wearing a Mariners jersey. This guy showed up and showed out all day, and obviously became a target, because they grabbed that fucking guy and beat the shit out of him and dogpiled him, all the while shooting everybody in the radius with pepper bullets and rubber bullets. And, the amount of violence in that, like, maybe 30 seconds was insane. So I'm filming, and when I tell you about these arrests, I am not exaggerating a fucking thing. They were shooting so many of those pepper rounds into the crowd and at people who weren't barricading the doors. They were just there. They hit press. They don't care. They didn't give a fuck. They shot everyone up in the crowd. So many bullets popped off. It sounded like a machine gun. And then at the end of it, the entire ground of the courtyard was just covered in white powder. And I mean, we were all suffering. It was as if they had released a tear gas canister, maybe a low level, like maybe a small one, but it was as if they had released a tear gas canister into the crowd. But they didn't. They show of force wanted to use projectiles so that they could walk out there with a gun. It was for show, and that was the waiting game too. They could have left. They could have done a whole lot of shit. And honestly, at that point, I think it was just entertainment for them, sitting in that building and watching and laughing, and then coming out intermittently to fuck us up, like to really hurt people. Um, the guy that they arrested and they dogpiled, he was absolutely unconscious by the end of it. They dragged him inside. They, I mean, there's a wonderful video from the burner. The burner got a much better look at this than I ever could have, because at that point in time, I was filming on my partner's phone, and honestly, I couldn't breathe. Like, I was getting out of there because the amount of shit that was in the air, I couldn't. I didn't have a mask. I didn't have a respirator, and I didn't have my glasses on. So I'm just sitting there in the. There are a lot of people in that same situation, but clearly they handled it better than I could have physically, because I couldn't even be over there until the dust had cleared, essentially. But the burner has a fantastic video of this guy getting arrested. He's wearing a Mariners jersey. It's like a teal Mariner jersey, and it's I mean, he was just absolutely a hero all day. And then the other person who was arrested in the same swoop, as far as I could tell, nobody knew who they were. So, I mean, I don't know the guy in the Mariners name at all. So we don't have like information about these people right now at all. Just that they got pulled into that building and we don't know what happened after that. So there was a fair amount of violence. We left because the neighboring building had potentially a sniper on the roof. There was somebody at the building right next to us at the very top of the roof walking around with something poking out, like really high up there. So it was kind of hard to see. But there were people up there. And I would not have been surprised if that event got much more violent. I'm about to go tune in and see what I've missed. I think people are probably going to be sleeping there tonight if I had to guess, or sitting in, unless they've already been arrested for doing so. Either way, I left when I did. This is my full video update on this currently. I'll be talking about it a lot more over the next week, and I will also be going to more protests over the next week. So if you want to come out and see this kind of behavior and activity face-to-face and in person so that you can see what I'm talking about, come out tomorrow to Cal Anderson Park at 7 p.m. 7 p.m. Cal Anderson Park.